Okay, I'm gonna do it in English because we have a lot of foreign guests as well here. So thank you, Katie. I'm very happy that you made it over here. And my talk is gonna be maybe not as structured. It's gonna be all over the place because there's a lot to be said on this topic. But I call it a Nordic approach to coaching and youth development, not talent development. So I've been lucky to been sort of, my journey in sport has been sort of been as a traveler through many different domains in different countries. So I've been the coach with the 6-year-olds. I've been working with international elite players. I have been working in America. I lived in America for 5 years, China for 1 year. So I've been also working with a lot of student athletes after we founded Afreksið MK and from about 24 different sports. And because I think we can focus on the negative, I'd like to start out by saying, you know, I'm very happy and very proud of the system that we have when I'm taking my kids as a father through the system. I have a 4-year-old and a girl who's going to be 8. And the basketball training that my 4-year-old son has is just outstanding. You know, it's better than the NBA. And I think we have to be, so my message today is going to be like, and this is also why Katie caught my interest when we saw her in the European Sports Psychology Conference this summer. I think her message is a good one, and it's prescient, and it's something that we need to think about, even though we are doing a lot of good stuff. So one of the questions with the conference was, how can we save future elite athletes without sacrificing joy? And I'm focusing on that a little bit. And like I said, we saw Katie this summer in Austria with her talk. And my own experience with North America is also like, you know, it's a lot about money. It's a lot about buy-in prestige. Parents buy in prestige by, you know, involving themselves in private football clubs or private baseball clubs. So you are buying sort of like a Gucci handbag by going into this program instead of the other one. And with a lot of consequences that parents, you know, they just want the best for the kids. You never meet a parent who doesn't want the best for the kids. But maybe we also need to have conversations about what is really a good sports journey for a kid. What does it entail, and what are the dangers on the way? So I think, you know, Katie, you know, sort of like a canary in a coal mine for us in Europe. That's definitely what we were thinking after we saw her presentation this summer. And in elite sports, it's really hard not to join a race to the bottom. This is actually the term that is used in talent development academia, that elite sports training for youth athletes is a race to the bottom. And it's really hard not to join it because it looks so good, because the kids have such fancy uniforms, the training is so structured, the coach is such a, you know, he speaks a good game. You get to travel, you get to do all these fancy things. So the parents and the players are obviously asking, you know, why can't we have this? We have to be like this club because they travel to Spain to play, and we have to be like this club because they have a lot of, you know, fancy clothes. So if, you know, Barcelona's doing it, you know, we should be doing the same. But, you know, we are not Barcelona, we are not in that context, and almost nobody is. So, you know, using Barcelona as a benchmark, it doesn't work in our environment. Although, you know, they do have really fancy clothes and really fancy training. So this autumn, after seeing Katie's presentation, I was asked by Viðar at ESE to address the Nordic Coaching Council meeting in Reykjavik, and he asked me to just ponder a little bit this question, because that's what they were thinking about. And this is a group of coach education specialists from the Nordic Olympic committees who are meeting in Reykjavik. Is there a distinct Nordic approach to coaching and talent development? Because, you know, Katie is describing the North American system. So is there a Nordic approach, and, you know, what does it look like, and what should it include? And so obviously I had to go and ask a lot of people who are smarter than me, and from all the Nordics, and including Christian, had a really good conversation with him. And people I know and trust that, are doing, they're not just people who know the academic stuff, but they are also people who have worked with athletes for a long time. So I had a discussion with all of these people, and then we presented, and we had a good discussion with the Nordic Coaching Council about this. I think the first conclusion was the Nordics are similar but different. We are similar in Iceland, but we are also different within Iceland. But we are similar to Norway, and we're similar to Finland and Denmark, but there are differences. So that's the first thing to keep in mind. But there is a Nordic approach, according to these specialists, these experts, and a lot of soft stuff, a lot of, pretty little things, not the hard stuff, not the authoritarian coach. It's a lot of egalitarian, athlete-centered, holistic, ecological, athlete-driven development, sport as a social good, these kind of things. So that's what the experts are saying. So, but as you know, experts are under attack in many fields. So we had to ask ChatGPT also. But ChatGPT also agrees that this is it's the soft skills, it's the soft values, balance between sport and life, sustainable practices, long-term perspectives, equality, holistic development. This is the same thing, and I did this after we had this. I had the discussions with the experts. So community values, equality, long-term growth. That's what our model is still. And and I will say this, although and this is why we have this conference today, is there are signs that we are having more professionalization, but we also have so many good things still in our environment, and we need to maybe defend them. One thing that Louise from Denmark and Christian were talking about, that we should have more discussion about the soul in sports. Why do we do sports? What is it really about at the end of the day? Is it about, and that's when you start looking at, like when Christian Eriksen fell to the ground, this was a big moment for the Danish people, am I right, Karsten? It's a moment in history for the Danes when they came together, and how the Danish players approached this whole thing. This was a big moment of coming together in a society that's always, becoming more apart. Then, the two Olympians who shared a gold medal, like agreed to, stop jumping. And then they get a lot of, people on social media who have never jumped in their life, and, saying that they're weak, why are you sharing, and just like Simone Biles has all these experts sitting on the couches telling her how she should be approaching her training. But their joy in their face, if you haven't seen the video, it's true, it's pure. They both became Olympic champions. They were sharing it. Great moment, and we remember that moment. We don't remember many of the other gold medalists from those games. And the Syrian swimmers who were allowed to compete in the 2016 games, the people who went through a lot of hardship, war, being on the run and that kind of stuff. Those kind of stories get made into movies, not necessarily who wins this trophy or that trophy, unless there's something, a big story about it. I always like this photo of Andri Fannar Baldursson when he was 14 years old. At the last minute, we called him to be a ball boy at a national team game in football. And this photo was on the front or back page of Morgunblaðið or Fréttablaðið the day after. And about 3 or 4 or 5 years later, they're playing together. The captain and him, they're playing together in the national team. That's a great story. And I know it means a lot to Andri. And these are the kind of stories that we should maybe think more about, and think about when we're thinking about sports. What is it that we really want out of sports? And academics are getting more and more into this sort of philosophical view. Violetta Peters from Switzerland, she's been doing work on, and Nora Ronkanen from Finland, they've been doing a lot of work recently on, meaning and purpose for elite sports. Violetta is an Olympian skier, So the athletes have been looking into their own experiences. Andreas Kuttel, who is with Karsten in Southern Denmark University, he's a world champion ski jumper. And now he spends his time as a researcher trying to research, what was it all about? What was it really that stood with me, and what was the whole meaning behind my career? But mostly when you ask people, why do we do sports? It's because we just simply love them. And it's because we started as kids, with our friends, with a ball and a goal, or a basket, or a skate and some ice and that kind of stuff. We also do it because it's a part of healthy lifestyle, and this is something that foreigners often talk about when I'm showing them around here. They say there's somebody out there running, or there's a lot of people in the community sports centers. It's a part of healthy lifestyles, but also they build community. Our kids become part of the community by being 3, 4, 5 years old, and they come into their neighborhood club, and then you say, yeah, this person is from Valur, and this person is from FH, and it becomes part of your identity. And I don't think we have researched enough or discussed enough how big of a part this is of making kids part of the community, being part of a sports club. Also, we do sports with our friends and family. This is a benefit of the volunteer club system, that our friends and family are involved. I don't think, after my experience, that parents are a problem in sports. I think they're a really good thing if they are close. And also, at the end, we do sports to challenge ourselves. We want to achieve. If there's a mountain that hasn't been climbed, we want to try to climb it. So that's the elite and achievement part of sports, which is also important. We also have to keep in mind that we want to do sports to become better, and so we also have to have that element to it. One of the esteemed Nordic experts had this to say. He, because we always talk about that sports are so good to develop people, but he said, if it's done wrong, it can have the adverse effect. So, it does, just by sending your kids to sport doesn't mean that necessarily it's just good habits that they will develop, or it's just a good culture. Johan Folby, the Swedish sports psychologist, he's been credited with this quote that the best talent development environments, they keep as many as possible for as long as possible in the best environment possible. So the fact that we let kids into the sports clubs by the age of 3 or 4, and we don't kick them out until they're 19, this is a big benefit to us. And I think we've enjoyed the fruits of so many athletes who either changed sports, like Guðni, who goes to the Olympics, his in track and field, his development was through golf. And we have so many examples of even football players who started to shine at later stages. After having this discussion about the Nordic values, I'd like to add a few things. We would like our kids to be self-driven, that the fire that is burning within them for sports, that is their own fire. But they are community supported. They're supported by the local community, and they understand that they are important parts of a whole. It's really important to meet somebody who has been a high achiever, who understands that it was not just their journey, it was their whole community behind them normally who is the reason that they managed to achieve. So Louis from Denmark talked about, because we sat together in Katie's presentation in last summer, and her thought was, we have this North American hero story of the athlete or coach who makes it in the adverse situation against all odds and the opponents. But we also have a story in the Nordics, and can we be better at telling our story? Like the headmaster of a high school in Denmark told us when we visited them that, we asked them, why are you doing sports with school? And she said, because it's an important part of the story. It brings us together, and it brings us encouragement. And who doesn't get goosebumps when you think about France 2016? How great of a moment was that when 30,000 people went there, and everybody felt like they sort of had a part of it. And we also need to check it with reality. So and I think it's good to balance both the academic stuff, but also with your experiences. And so I presented the Nordic Council the case study of 2 football clubs from my hometown, and specifically kids born between 1998 and 2004. And I know I've shown this photo to some people before, but I took this photo 1 week before I left Breiðablik after working there for 10 years. And I was going to China, and I was finishing one of my last practices at Breiðablik, and I saw those boys playing in one of the corners. And at Breiðablik, it was a big thing for all the coaches and for the environment that if there's a small corner that you can play in, you can play there. And it's the same in Akranes and many other clubs. Kids can play. They can join, and they can use the facilities. It's not like the first team has the facilities and now you have to leave. So these boys had been there, for 10 years. The whole 10 years I was at Breiðablik, they had just been there in the corner playing. And I know many of you recognize many of the names, but there's 7 boys in that picture who have since, managed to get a professional contract abroad. Who did play for either Breiðablik or Háká at some point in their youth career. So why were they successful? And this is just a random group of boys that happened to be there at that moment. And I just said, hey guys, I gotta have a photo of this because this is important. And they, I think they were successful because they played a lot. I mean, they only had like 4 trainings a week on an average, maybe a game every 2 weeks. That was the structure. But the structure was not coach-driven in my experience. It was, we had some guided learning, we had some points because we had so many kids to manage that we could not, have individual plans for everybody. But I think this thing helped them to be good. They were there with their friends, they were having fun, and they spent a lot of time on the grass. And then they went home and they watched football and they talked about football and they went and played FIFA. So football was a big part of their identity, but the fire was their own. It was self-driven fire. Then I told the story in a FA. I was teaching for the FA on a Saturday morning, 1 January, 5 years later. And I told the story to a group of young coaches who were doing their first coach education. And I said, if you're working with young people, make sure you build this into the environment. Have fun, with your friends. Then we go into this place in the afternoon for a session on the grass with the coaches. Guess who's there playing? These guys. Now 22, 23, and they're on Christmas break. This is early January, many of them, and they're still playing. 5 o'clock in the afternoon, they're not, just sitting on a sofa or meeting with their friends in a cafe. They're still playing football together as friends. And like I said, some of them have become professionals, and obviously, we follow their progress. And I think they also have a really good support network for each other as professionals, that they support each other because professional football is a tough world. But 7 professional players from this age group would be pretty good for almost every other club. Like if we had a club like this in America, we would charge $5,000 per semester because we had so many professional players. But these guys have also become professional players from the age groups of 1998 to 2004. And most of them are still professional players because there's always this talk about that they're going on a contract too early, they're coming home, but a lot of them are still in the professional game at a pretty good level. And they didn't have any elite athlete training. They would just showed up for training in their own clothes. If they wanted to be Messi, they could be Messi. So I guess my point is that I'm just trying to point out that, you know, you don't necessarily need the fancy stuff. You know, there are elements in our communities that we can maybe enhance, try to offer a little bit more quality, you know, in some places, but let's try to, you know, try to find out where is the enhancement that we're seeking, where is it going to come from? Is it going to come from making these boys do a lot more structured stuff, travel a lot more abroad, those kind of things? I'm not sure. But at least, because Louis said we have to tell our stories, I feel like this is a story that we have to talk about. But then Kópavogur is a decent-sized Icelandic town with 43,000 people, something like that. There's also girls becoming professionals during that time. And more than 60 players from Breiðablik have played in US college soccer since 2001. There's 2 girls from Breiðablik and 1 boy who have a football scholarship at Harvard, which is ridiculously difficult to get into. So these are the kids who don't go directly into professional football. So again, you know, how much would you charge if Akranes or Breiðablik or Valur handbolti, you know, handball, or, you know, how much would you charge if you were in a club in America? And then there's Háká. You know, these boys played at various stages in youth for Háká in the same town, in the smaller club, but, you know, still pretty good output. Bundesliga, Swedish league, you know, Norwegian league. It's a really good output when you really think about it, when you talk to people who are working in talent development. And then, you know, they didn't have women's senior team, but they have the sports person of the year and the captain of Bayern Munich. You know, and it's a really interesting case story, I think, you know, and I think we have to tell our stories again. And because we always, what always gets thrown back at me when I'm talking about football in Kópavogur is like, yeah, Kópavogur just concentrates on football, but, you know, no. Because the environment is encouraging for kids to, you know, play sports, be in sports. There's accessibility, there's opportunity. There's national team players in handball. These 2 girls have been playing professional volleyball in Europe in the last year. I'm not sure a lot of people know. Ágúst Ingi, Dagur, Ágúst is actually, you know, aiming for the best finish an Icelandic gymnast has had, you know, at the next Olympics. And so there's a lot of kids getting a lot of opportunity to achieve, if achieving is really what we're talking about, because I talked about all the soft stuff that we get with sports. But by concentrating a lot on the soft stuff, I think you can also achieve. You know, you don't have to do it the Canadian private ice hockey way. Again, you know, so the question is, you know, what is it that we need to change, really? We need to ask this question. You know, this is, again, Breiðablik, number 6 in Europe, in the top clubs who release players underage to other professional clubs. And we see the criticism that Katie has been doing all over. Karsten's going to be here, and really happy to have him also. He wrote this great book. You should all read it. You know, go and buy it. Do I get royalties? And but I make both of my classes at this university read this book because it's really important. It's people who not only are academics, but they also have applied experience working with athletes for a long time. Then Joe Baker, who is one of the eminent experts on talent development in the world, he just wrote this book called The Tyranny of Talent, that sometimes it limits achievement instead of enhancing it. And then in the UK, they're thinking the same thing. So North America, Europe, UK, everybody's thinking the same thing. You know, this is nothing new, but I think we need to talk about it, and I think we need to also understand our, you know, environment and how we shape it. And there's a lot of bias. You know, I'm not going to go into every one of those biases when you have talent development, but I want to talk about, because I've been working in talent scouting for the last couple of years in my free time for a professional women's club in America. And among the 10 most expensive players in the world, there's 4 Africans from Zambia and Malawi who had nothing nothing like, we would call a talent development environment. So why are we willing to pay a lot of money for these players, like Tabitha Chawinga at Lyon? Why is she probably one of the best paid players in the world? Because she's different. She does different things. She knows how to take care of herself. She plays differently, and she's really fast also. But she's a different type of player than somebody who has just been brought up through a factory. She's organic, so to speak, and all of these players, and this is why they are bought for a lot of money. At the end, because when I hear the word elite, afrex in Iceland, it normally tells me that it's just about increased volume. People who say that they're doing elite training, mostly they just concentrate on let's train more instead of what is it that we're going to focus on. What are the things that we need to improve? It's just, hey, let's train more. And normally, hey, let's train like adults. The session will look fancy because it looks like the one that the senior team is doing or the national team is doing. And then finally, it's getting more and more available for those who can afford it. So we're charging extra for extra training. And that's that's the race to the bottom that we were talking about in the beginning. So what's missing in the talent development environment? Joy and fun. We need to make sure that there is joy and fun for the kids. That they can, because these are the moments late at night in basketball with your friends. That's what you remember. That's what you really love. That's what you really love about sports. Autonomy. That is it's my thing. It's not my parents' thing. It's not my coach's thing. It's my fire that's burning. That we have to make sure that the kids develop this fire. And then finally, balance, because as all of our experts will probably say that, we have to develop the whole person. If your identity is only in a single thing, it can be really limiting. It's a talent killer, so to speak, because when things fall apart, it's really difficult to step outside and evaluate. So make sure the kids can go to school, make sure they can be with their families, go on skiing vacations and those kind of things. So I want to show you this. Is this a coach-centered approach or an athlete-centered approach? This is the average attendance at MK. So if you're a normal student at MK, then you have 84.5% real attendance. If you're in the sports program, you have 79.2% attendance. But now teams have started to train during the day with their senior teams. And the national teams are starting to train in the day also. And if you see a group that is mostly going with the national teams during the day, they don't have such a big drop in performance because it's not as often as the clubs are doing it. But if you're in football, you're less than half the time in school because the club will tell you you have to show up at 10 o'clock and you leave by 1 o'clock, because that's how we see professionalization. But these kids are not professional, they're not getting paid any or a lot of money, and you're absolutely destroying the day. And additionally, the football players are taking less courses and failing more. A lot more. They will fail 56% of their courses if they are training during the day. And so who is this for? Is it for the coach or is it for the athlete? And I'm glad to say that one of the players from FH told me yesterday that they had actually changed their training to 3 o'clock instead of training at lunch, which is, I think, a good improvement and something that the clubs should consider. What is the effect that we're having? So these are the things that we get from the students at MK. Top athletes come in and say, I hate my sport, because they just have this identity. Nobody speaks to them about anything other than their sport. And they're just supposed to be sports people. Some of them hate national team practices just because they have such a disturbing effect on their overall lifestyle. A lot of the kids are playing for 2 to 4 teams in basketball, handball especially. There's a lot of basketball players who will play for the 17, 19, B team and the senior team. Handball also. And finally, they will never discuss this with their coach because they're not going to show any weakness. They're going to come to the student guidance counselor, they're going to come to the psychologist, they might come to us or the parents, but they will never tell the coach, I have an exam on Friday and there's training. They would rather go to the school and ask the school to skip the exam or move the exam because they feel like they will be cut because the coach has the future in their hands. So my final slide. So we need to discuss in our community, and really happy to see so many people who are decision makers in our community. Why are we doing sports? Who is it for? And who gets to decide what we do? Are we imitating something when we are creating something like elite coaching plans and Avrex, Þjálfun and that kind of stuff? Are we imitating Barcelona, Denmark, whoever? Do we know what is quality in our training? Or is it just quantity? And then finally, are we asking what is it that works in our context, in Iceland, in Icelandic society, with our values and with our realities when we are designing this whole thing? Thank you.
Já. Ég týndi mikrofónunum. Sér maður græna? Já, sorry. Ég þarf bara að hafa með mér. Herri, já, we have few questions, almost a lot. The players on the picture, did they do other sports than football?
No, actually, probably not a lot. They might have jumped into some training with the track and field division. I mean, some of them might have been at some time with the gymnastics, you know, but no. And there's conflicting research on this, you know. It's not maybe necessarily about doing many sports, but to have a, if your sports environment has like a built-in, how should we say, you know, many different sort of that you're not just doing the same thing all over and over again, that there's variety. If there's variety within the sports training that you're doing in a single sport, then that's better than just doing non-varied training within two sports.
Okay. Should we teach young kids how to have fun in this ever-changing environment, and can they enjoy sports while we are increasingly focusing on results?
I mean, I never met a kid who doesn't want to win a game. Like, you know, if they're in the A team or B team or C team, they all want to win the game. They all want to become better. It's about, like Katie was saying, about the pressure, the stressors from the environment. It's more about the message from the environment. So can we maybe just leave them alone once in a while, like with those boys on the photo? You know, I mean, a lot of these boys had sports parents with strong sports backgrounds. My experience with this was that they were hardly ever meddling, you know, in very few cases. They were not what you would call overall like a difficult parent. I mean, they would have questions, and that's natural, but, you know, sometimes just leave the kids alone, let them go and play.
Yes, I like that. What is your opinion of where Iceland seems to be headed in early professionalism in sports?
Both good and bad, because I think we all have this feeling that there is more and more professionalization, but I'm also really optimistic because I get to travel around a lot in Icelandic sports, and I think there's a lot of people, and I see a lot of you in the room now, who are aware of this, and you're actually trying to do something about it. I saw a really good football practice at IR earlier this week, where the coach designed a really clever exercise where he, you know, put a lot of autonomy onto the kids. You know, they were able to come to him with, you know, this is what I want to work on, and they directed this practice. So he will guide the next practice, but this practice, they were able to say this is what we want to do. So he's here. Good job.
How can we improve communication among sports in a club or governing body, or prevent football, handball, and other sports from being isolated from each other?
I think actually this is not as big of a problem as we think it is. I think the community is small. This is a benefit that we have. I think maybe just say from my experience in Kópavogur, when Breiðablik, Háká and Gerpla started to communicate more, I think just the whole capability and experience of working together was much better than working apart.
Okay. The last question, what advice would you give to a foreign coach arriving in a Nordic country who wants to develop sports but needs to adapt to the culture? It just depends on where they're from and what their individual perspective is really. But I think, I think a lot of the foreign coaches will add value because they will have, because you need different perspectives. I think a lot of them have added value. I think it's mostly just that if we have clashes, it's because they are thinking too much about things that were done back home. You have to take some things and leave them behind, some things that will work, and just find a way to, marry them together. Okay, thank you. Let's give them applause.